So, we are talking about summarizing nonfiction. And when we do that, we're going to be using these nonfiction summary frames. But to pick the right summary frame, we need to make sure that we are paying attention to the text structure of our article because each different text structure is going to have a different frame, basically. It's going to have a different summary frame. So, our first article is called Beastly Behavior. Now, the first thing I notice in the title is this BEE, which makes me think that our article is going to have something to do with bees. All right, now, as I'm reading, we're going to be making note of things that really point out the text structure so that we know which summary frame to use. Now, while I am noting things on my version of the article, I want you to be marking the same things on your version. So let's go ahead and get started. Beastly Behavior by Nancy Fenton. Killer bees have a nasty name and a bad reputation. Do they deserve it? Or are they just doing what comes naturally? Scientists have a joke about killer bees. How can you tell the difference between a regular honeybee hive and a killer beehive? Kick the hive and see how far you run. Now, I know this is a joke, but I'm immediately seeing right here where it says difference between. And I'm going to go ahead and mark that. And it's saying a difference between a regular honeybee hive. So I see honeybee here. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. Honeybee hive and a killer bee hive. Okay, so I see that honeybee and killer bee. So I'm going to go ahead and mark those. So we have difference between honeybee and killer bee. So we're going to go ahead and keep reading and see if that actually turns into something. Now I see a quote, so it tells me this is something that someone is saying. It says, regular bees might buzz you for 100 feet or so, explains insect expert Margaret McMichael. But killer bees might chase you for 2 miles. Okay, so I'm definitely seeing a comparison here. So I see regular bees. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that because that's, again, our, like before, the honeybees. So regular bees might buzz you for 100 feet or so. But I'm going to go ahead and underline that because for me that's showing the comparison. But killer bees, so again, that's what we're comparing here, might chase you for 2 miles. And I'm going to go ahead and underline these things too. So 2 miles for the killer bees and 100 feet for the regular honeybees. So this is showing me regular honeybees will go for 100 feet, whereas the killer bees will chase you for 2 miles. So that's a comparison here. Okay, we're seeing the difference between the two. Let's see if this keeps going. So killer bees first flew into the U.S. in 1990. Well, seeing a date here, it makes me wonder if there's actually going to be chronological order. So I'm just going to keep that in mind because so far I've seen 2 comparisons. So I'm going to remember that there was a date here so that I keep chronological order in my mind. But I'm still feeling like we're going to be leaning more towards towards compare and contrast here. So let's see. Killer bees first flew into the U.S. in 1990. Since then, they've attacked more than 200 victims, killing 2. Some people say the bees are brutal, but should you believe it? Read on and decide for yourself. Natural-born killers. I'm going to scroll down. A killer bee sting is no more deadly than a regular bee sting. So right here I see no more deadly than, and I know that is a comparison. So I'm going to go ahead and underline that. So a killer bee sting, and once again, we're comparing these two. So killer bee, going to highlight that. And a regular bee or a honey bee. So again, we're comparing these two things. So all honeybees have venom or poison in their stingers. 500 bee stings hold as much poison as a rattlesnake bite, says Margaret. People who are allergic to bee venom can die from just one sting, but most people can tolerate hundreds. So it's giving us information about bee venom, but nothing that's really a comparison or a contrast or anything like that. So I think we can keep reading. In many ways, killer bees also behave like regular honeybees. So again, we're comparing right here. Killer bees, I'm going to highlight that, and regular honeybees. Let's see. And also behave like. So that's showing us another comparison. So I'm going to go ahead and underline that. So in many ways, killer bees also behave like regular honeybees. All bees attack when they think their hive is in danger. So I'm going to go right here, all bees. That's showing me we're comparing here. So all bees attack when they think their hive is in danger. So I'm going to underline that because this is what we are, the comparison that's being made. So I guess I could actually probably highlight this. Let's do the highlight. All right, so all bees attack when they think their hive is in danger, says Margaret. To a bee, any sound or sudden motion can signal danger, like a bear or hyena out to steal honey. But some differences, right, I'm going to underline that right now, we have differences. But some differences in behavior make killer bees more deadly. So I see that now it looks like we're about to do the contrasting. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. And you guys can underline, circle, whatever you want to do on your papers. But since I have this highlighting capability, that's what I'm doing. So some differences in behavior make killer bees more deadly. Compared, and that's a big one for me right here, it's signaling. It's a signal word that we are doing compare and contrast. Compared to ordinary honeybees. So again, this is what we are comparing. Killer bees have, so this is signaling to me that we are about to go into a list that is telling me what killer bees have that is different from honeybees. Okay? So, because it's telling us some differences in behavior make them more deadly, and we're comparing, but killer bees have these things. We can tell because there's this colon here that is signaling a list, and it's telling us killer bees have these things. So what I'm starting to notice is that these first two paragraphs, really this first section, was showing all of these comparisons. So these first two sections were showing a lot of comparisons. However, now it seems like we're delving into the differences. So we did the comparing and now we're contrasting. We're showing how they are different. So this is really pointing out to me that when we go to our summary frame, we're definitely going to be looking into the compare and contrast summary frame. So let's keep looking. Quick triggers. It takes very little to get killer bees riled up. They can sense you walking from about 2 car lengths away, says Margaret. So that's letting me know that killer bees have quick triggers, whereas honeybees do not. So this is a difference that they have. I'm going to go ahead and underline that. Big colonies. Hives can hold more than 50,000 bees, so lots of bees answer an alarm signal. So again, this is showing me something that killer bees have, because this is what we're talking about, what killer bees have, that honeybees do not. So they are different because killer bees have big colonies. Okay, so let's underline that. And staying power. A cloud of bees once followed me for 20 minutes, remembers Margaret. Luckily, there were no holes in my bee suit. So staying power is the other thing that killer bees have that honeybees do not. And actually, that reminds me, at the beginning of our article, one of the differences that was mentioned was that regular bees might chase you for about 100 feet, but killer bees will chase you for 2 miles. So that's definitely a contrast, a difference. So these are the ways in which they are different. So let's keep reading and see what else we see. Living with killer bees. I don't think it's possible to stop these bees altogether, says Margaret. So people are learning ways to get along with them. Here's what South American beekeepers do: avoid loud noises and sudden movements. Work at night. It's cooler and bees are less active. Smoke them out. Smoke makes them think their house is on fire, says Margaret. To get energy to fly away, they swallow a belly full of honey. It's hard to sting with a full belly. So this is seeming like a little bit of problem and solution, because the problem is living with killer bees. It's how to deal with them being so irritable, I guess is a good word here. However, the vast majority of our article has been compare and contrast. So I would definitely say that is more where we're going to lean, because that's the majority of the article. Let's see what this last little bit says. As the bees move north, people in their path learn ways to avoid being stung. So yeah, that goes with a little bit of problem and solution. It's best to leave them alone, says Margaret. If all else fails, cover your head and run for shelter. All right, so I think in the end, we can definitely say that this article is primarily compare and contrast, because it's definitely been comparing honeybees with killer bees over and over and over again. So that is what we are going to focus on when we go to our summary frame. So make sure that you have marked your article in the same way that I have.